Oscar Piastri's world championship dream was almost reality in 2025, but now it's all falling apart. With 7 wins, 6 poles, and a second-place finish, he proved he's world-class. Yet McLaren's internal politics, questionable team calls, and Norris's dominance have thrown his future into doubt. The worst part? It's not just about racing anymore. It's about whether Piastri stays in McLaren's shadow or makes a huge move to a rival team. Is it time for Oscar to leave McLaren and claim his own destiny, or will he be stuck fighting for crumbs in the Norris era? Oscar Piastri entered the 2025 Formula One season with all eyes on him. After a solid rookie season in 2024, expectations were sky high, and rightly so. His debut year was enough to prove that he wasn't just a one-hit wonder, but that he belonged among the best in Formula One. As McLaren's new star, Piastri was ready to take on the world, and for the most part, he did. He gave the best in F1 a run for their money and showcased incredible talent that had everyone talking. However, despite finishing the season with 7 wins, 6 pole positions, and finishing second in the championship, Piastri's 2025 season was ultimately defined by what could have been. For much of the year, Piastri was one of the most consistent drivers on the grid. He was in the title fight for a large part of the season, constantly battling his teammate Lando Norris, who was having the year of his life. The two McLaren drivers were often neck and neck, with Piastri showing the world that he was more than capable of handling the pressure. However, despite all the good, it was the mistakes, the unfortunate incidents, and the sheer bad luck that ultimately derailed his championship bid. A crash in Australia, a disqualification in Las Vegas, and strategy missteps at key moments left him with a bitter second-place finish. It was a season that could have been his, but for several costly errors that haunted him throughout the year. Piastri's first setback came in Australia, where he made an uncharacteristic mistake that cost him 16 to 23 points. That was a significant blow early in the season, but it didn't stop there. In Azerbaijan, Piastri was involved in a crash, which left him with 0 points and no chance to capitalize on a competitive race weekend. It wasn't just the mistakes on track, it was the bad luck that seemed to follow him around. In Brazil and Austin, he was unable to make significant progress in the sprint races, scoring 0 points in both. These missed opportunities began to add up, and as the season progressed, the gap to Lando Norris began to grow. But perhaps the most significant blow came in Las Vegas, when McLaren's technical breach resulted in Piastri's disqualification from the race, costing him more points in a critical part of the season. Even with all these setbacks, Piastri was still very much in the title fight. His racecraft and ability to bounce back were undeniable. But the questions began to arise. Was it bad luck, or was it something deeper? The errors weren't just on Piastri's shoulders. There were also team decisions that seemed to favor his teammate, Lando Norris. Despite McLaren's claims of a neutral team environment, there was a growing perception that Norris was being treated as the team's main driver, while Piastri was left to battle not just on track, but also within the team. It's a delicate balance in Formula One. On the one hand, McLaren wanted both drivers to have equal opportunities. On the other, they had a world champion in the making in Lando Norris. McLaren's team dynamic began to show signs of friction as Piastri fought for his place. There were moments during the season when it seemed like McLaren's strategic decisions leaned heavily in Norris's favor, leaving Piastri with the sense that he was being undermined by his own team. While McLaren's leadership publicly insisted on neutrality, the actions on track told a different story. In Qatar, for example, McLaren's strategic call seemed to favor Norris, and Piastri was left out in a tough position. In Silverstone, Monza, and Hungary, team strategy decisions were often called into question, with many believing that McLaren was placing more focus on Norris's race. That led to a growing feeling of imbalance within the team, something that Piastri, despite his excellent performance, couldn't escape. Despite all of this, Piastri continued to battle. His race performances were solid, and he showed he could keep pace with Norris, even when things weren't going his way. However, when the final points were tallied, he found himself second to Norris, 13 points behind, with Norris claiming his first ever world championship. The question on everyone's mind now was, where does this leave Piastri? McLaren's internal structure will be under intense scrutiny in the coming seasons, especially given the fact that Norris is now the team's world champion and will likely have an increased role within the team. For Piastri, it raises a tough question. Will McLaren truly remain neutral moving forward, or will the champion bias begin to creep in? And more importantly, how much longer will Piastri be willing to fight in Norris's shadow? The internal team dynamics at McLaren and how they evolve after Norris's title will be crucial in determining Piastri's future at the team. The growing perception is that Piastri may no longer have the freedom he had in 2025, and with Norris now the established champion, the team's allegiance could shift more and more toward him. This leaves Piastri at a crossroads. Does he accept the role of second driver at McLaren, or does he seek a new challenge? And that's where the bigger question comes into play. Does Oscar Piastri stay at McLaren or seek a fresh start at a new team? The world of Formula One is constantly evolving, and with the introduction of new regulations in 2026, there are new opportunities and new teams to consider. But the question is whether Piastri's options are good enough to challenge for a championship elsewhere. Red Bull seems to be the most likely option, with their continued dominance in the sport. But with Ford's new power unit and potential shifts in their lineup, Piastri would have to make the decision of whether to join a team on the rise or stay at a McLaren team that still holds promise but is dealing with its own set of challenges. Another option is Aston Martin, with their significant investment in Adrian Newey and their partnership with Honda. Aston Martin is gearing up for a potential resurgence in Formula One, and Piastri could be the driver to lead their charge in the coming years. But the risk is whether they can continue to improve and remain competitive enough to challenge the likes of Red Bull and Mercedes. And then there's Mercedes, a team that has always been a powerhouse but has struggled in recent seasons. Joining Mercedes would bring its own set of challenges, especially with Lewis Hamilton still present and the team trying to find its footing in the post-dominance era. But Mercedes' historical success and resources would still make them an attractive option for a young driver like Piastri. For now, Piastri has to contend with the harsh reality of his second-place finish. As much as he has proven himself on track, he is now forced to navigate the political landscape of McLaren. The team's internal dynamics are shifting, and Piastri's future at McLaren could depend on whether they can maintain their neutral stance moving forward. But in a sport where favors can be drawn, can Piastri really expect to fight for the title when the team's focus could shift toward Norris? The next 12 to 18 months will be critical for Piastri. His future is uncertain, and how he handles the challenges of team politics, media pressure, and the internal McLaren dynamic will determine his legacy. Can he win a title under McLaren's current structure, or is it time for a fresh start at a new team? The stage is set for a massive decision in 2027. If Piastri stays at McLaren, he'll face the continued pressure of living up to Norris's world champion status. If he decides to move, he'll be walking into a completely new challenge at a different team. Either way, Piastri's future is full of question marks, and how he handles this pivotal crossroads will define his career. Ultimately, the world of F1 is watching, and in the next few years, we'll find out if Piastri can truly claim a title, either with McLaren or elsewhere. The road ahead is uncertain, but one thing is for sure: Oscar Piastri's story is far from over.